In 1963, when the Western region took control of the southwestern main line to Exeter beyond Salisbury, the winds of change were gathering for the railway branch lines of East Devon. Until then, the Southern's route to the west retained its mainline status. The Atlantic Coast Express departed London's Waterloo station at 11 a.m, conveying through coaches to destinations in Devon and Cornwall, including the East Devon resorts of Sidmouth, Budleigh, Salterton and Exmouth. At the height of the summer season, trains were packed with holidaymakers, eagerly looking forward to their fortnight by the seaside. Until the mid-1960s, passengers could book a through-rail ticket from Waterloo direct to the seaside resorts dotted along the coastline from Lyme Bay to the Exe estuary. From the 1940s to the early 60s, West of England express trains were hauled by Bulleid's powerful Merchant Navy, West Country and Battle of Britain class locomotives. Making a smoky exit through London's southwestern suburbs, they were as familiar a sight as the Southern's electric units, although somewhat more impressive as they gathered speed through Clapham Junction, Wimbledon and Woking. In 1953, the weekday timetable provided morning departures from Waterloo at 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock. This was followed by a lunchtime train at 1 o'clock, a mid-afternoon express at 3 p.m. and finally a 6 o'clock service to Plymouth. Most mainline trains to the West Country offered passengers full restaurant car facilities, with the dining car being conveyed to and from Exeter Central. To cope with the holiday traffic on summer Saturdays, many additional trains were scheduled on the Southern's main line to the West Country. Services departed Waterloo at 8:05 in the morning, 9 o'clock and 11:45, with through carriages exclusively for Sidmouth, Budleigh, Salterton, Littleham and Exmouth. A similar pattern of service was scheduled in the up direction for holidaymakers returning from East Devon. After a brief stop at Salisbury, the Atlantic Coast Express raced on through Wiltshire, Dorset and Somerset to reach its first calling point in Devon, at Sidmouth Junction. Other trains called at Templecombe, Yeovil Junction, Axminster and Seaton Junction. It was, and still is, a delightful journey, exchanging the commuter heartlands of Surrey and Hampshire for the lush green valleys of Wessex. At Axminster, a branch train to Lyme Regis would be simmering in the bay platform, waiting to connect with mainline services to and from Exeter. A few miles farther down the line at Seaton Junction, a similar scene could be found, with a local train ready to depart on the 4.5-mile journey to Seaton. Connections guaranteed. Next came a grinding 5-mile climb at 1 in 80 before plunging into Honiton Tunnel. After reaching the inclined summit at its western end, it was an easy run to Sidmouth Junction. Once again, there was a branch train waiting in the downside bay platform. The station name board displayed a list of onward destinations connecting the main line to Ottery St Mary, Tipton St John's, Sidmouth, Budleigh Salterton and Exmouth. On arrival at the junction, the through carriages from Waterloo to Sidmouth and Exmouth would be detached from the rear of the Atlantic Coast Express. It is here that our story begins. In the early 19th century, long-distance travel was restricted to the privileged few. For those that could afford it, a journey by stagecoach was tiring and dangerous, often for days on end, on roads that were little more than dirt tracks. Despite this, the cream of London society sought the delights of relaxing in far-off continental spa resorts, a pleasure denied them at the outbreak of the Napoleonic Wars in 1803. As a result, the popularity of several British seaside resorts increased, among them Sidmouth, with its mild climate and sheltered south-facing seafront nestling between Salcombe Hill in the east and Peak Hill in the west. Indeed, both royalty and aristocracy graced the town in Regency times, enhancing its reputation as a place of genteel living. But great changes were underway which would bring a huge upheaval in the social life of Britain, not least the coming of the railway. As early as 1836, a scheme to build a railway for a new harbour at Sidmouth was started, but never completed. The first attempt to bring the railway to East Devon came in 1846. Proposals were put forward for the Exeter, Yeovil and Dorchester Railway, with a branch line to Sidmouth. However, this project was abandoned. Next came the Devon and Dorset Railway in 1852, a broad gauge affair from Maiden Newton to Exeter, also with a branch to Sidmouth. Once again, the scheme was aborted. The following year, the Central Western Railway was established. 7 years elapsed. However, in July of 1860, by then known as the Salisbury and Yeovil Railway, its line was opened from Yeovil to Exeter, operated by the London and South Western Railway. Fennyton Station, on what was to become the LSWR main line from Waterloo to Exeter, was opened to passengers on the 18th of July. Within a year it was renamed Ottery and Sidmouth Road, stirring, it seems, the aspirations of local citizens in nearby Sidmouth. By December of 1861, a meeting was held in the town, proposing a railway from Sidmouth to link with mainline services to London and the West. Not to be outdone, in 1862, separate proposals were underway for a railway from Tipton St John's to the nearby resort of Salterton. By the summer of 1863, both the Sidmouth and Harbour Company and Sidmouth and Budleigh Salterton Railway had obtained their Acts of Parliament to construct new railway links. Sadly, both schemes were to fail, and little further progress was made during the 1860s. Undaunted by the lack of progress, in 1871 the Sidmouth Railway made yet another attempt to put the town on the railway map. Following a new Act of Parliament, construction was at last started. The Sidmouth Railway met the main line at Ottery Road Station, its name having changed for the third time. With due ceremony, the railway opened for traffic on the 6th of July 1874, with intermediate stations at Tipton St John's and Ottery St Mary. The mainline station had yet another name change, becoming the more familiar Sidmouth Junction, the name it held until closure in 1967. For 10 years, between 1876 and 1886, further schemes were proposed to forge a link with Budleigh Salterton, but a lack of financial support proved the stumbling block to any real progress. Undeterred by past failures, by 1893 the engineer William Clark submitted new proposals for a line from Tipton St John's to Budleigh Salterton. Despite strong opposition from the Exmouth Docks Company and local traders, the Budleigh-Salterton Railway Act was passed on the 20th of July 1894. The cutting of the first sod was undertaken on the 6th of November 1895 by Lady Gertrude Roll, wife of Lord Roll of Bicton, who supported the railway's development. 2 years later, on the 15th of May 1897, the Budleigh-Salterton Railway was finally opened. The first train is seen arriving at Salterton. A separate station was built to serve Budleigh. Within a year, plans were laid for an extension to Exmouth, authorised by a London South Western Act of Parliament on the 25th of July 1898. Earlier that year, Salterton Station was officially renamed Budleigh-Salterton, and Budleigh became East Budleigh. Further expansion took place in 1899 when the village of Newton Poppleford gained its station on the 1st of June. The final link in East Devon's railway network was completed on the 1st of June 1903 with the opening of the Exmouth and Budleigh-Salterton Railway. The construction of the line required heavy engineering works in the vicinity of Knoll, west of Budleigh-Salterton. A deep cutting through the dense woodlands in the area was excavated using steam navvies, a modern invention of the times. Nearer to Exmouth, a station was provided to serve the village of Littleham. The new line joined the existing Exeter to Exmouth Railway opened in 1861 at a junction to the north of the station. In January 1923, the railways of East Devon became part of the newly formed Southern Railway. However, the Sidmouth Railway Company had survived as an independent concern until late in 1922, unlike many smaller companies which had been taken over by their larger neighbours. Life on the East Devon branches remained much the same until nationalisation in 1948, and even then, in the ownership of British Railways Southern Region, the railway continued to be steam-operated in the time-honoured way. Not until 1963, when British Railways regional boundary changes took place and the lines became part of the Western Region, did any significant change occur. Following publication of the Beeching Report in 1963, the threat of closure loomed on the horizon. Diesel multiple units began appearing soon after the Western Region took control, in the hope they might stem the steady decline in traffic. Sadly, it was not enough to stop the closure notices appearing, which they did in August 1964. By the spring of 1966, both Newton Poppleford and East Budleigh stations had been downgraded in status to that of unstaffed halts. Despite objections being raised, passenger services on both lines were withdrawn from the 6th of March 1967. The last trains ran on Saturday the 4th of March, accompanied by a crowd of well-wishers and enthusiasts who had gathered to say farewell to the railway. After almost 100 years, the valley of the River Otter would no longer echo to the familiar sounds of the once mighty Iron Horse. During the first 14 years of its existence, Fennyton Station saw no fewer than 4 changes to its name. Within a year of opening, it became known as Ottery and Sidmouth Road. At the beginning of 1868, it was renamed Fennyton for Ottery St Mary. Then, 2 months later, Ottery Road. With the opening of the branch to Sidmouth in 1874, the LSWR finally settled on Sidmouth Junction. Although used mainly for branch line connections, the station also served the rural community around the village of Fennyton. 2 through platforms served the main line. The station building on the downside included a booking hall, ticket office and station master's accommodation. Platform 1 on the upside was reached by way of a footbridge. The open platform itself was somewhat less protective, being without a canopy to fend off the elements. Platform 2 on the downside was shorter, constrained by a level crossing at one end and sidings into the goods yard at the other. The level crossing was controlled by a ground frame cabin next to the line. Platform 3, a bay on the downside, was used by branch line trains. In order to change ends, loco crews had to propel their coaches out to the station yard as the platform road was not provided with a run-round loop. When diesel multiple units took over from steam in the autumn of 1963, this time-honoured practice was no longer necessary. The branch line curved away to the south at the London end of the station, opposite the signal box, a tall building on the upside of the line. By all accounts, it was not unusual for the single-line token to be lowered out of the window on a rope for the branch line loco crew to collect. The goods shed and yard on the downside provided facilities for local farmers and merchants. Beyond the junction, the single line passed under two road bridges. The up-home signal immediately beyond the second had a double-arm bracket. Branch trains could be brought into either the bay or down main platforms. After a short section on the level, then at 1 in 53, the falling gradient eased as the line entered the valley of the River Otter. Before reaching the first station at Ottery St Mary, the railway passed over two level crossings, both on quiet country lanes. Gosford Gates was situated halfway between the junction and Ottery St Mary. Cadhay Gates, virtually identical, was half a mile farther on. Both locations had 5-lever Westinghouse ground frames, placed in front of the crossing keeper's cottage. A small wooden platform was situated next to the line. It was used for collecting and delivering water churns and other supplies for the crossing keeper. Leo Dolling, who started his railway career in the booking office at Ottery St Mary, relates the delightful tale of Jack Turner, the crossing keeper at Cadhay Gates, whose Sunday morning renditions on the bottles once rivalled the church bells at Ottery over a mile distant.
When you were out on those sort of places out at Caddy, you never had relief. You were there for every train from 6 o'clock in the morning to 10:30 at night. You had to be there. Weekends as well if there was a service. To amuse himself, he built himself a frame with bottles, empty bottles, and hung up. And he filled every one with water. They threw off different notes. And he got this to perfection. And he used to play hymns, he played tunes. And I lived at Ottery St Mary, and when the wind was blowing in the right direction, we could hear Fred's father playing these bottles, and you could hear him playing hymns on a Sunday morning on these bottles. Yeah, excellent it was.
At 2 3/4 miles from Sidmouth Junction, Ottery St Mary was the first crossing point on the single line section. Opened with the line in 1874, the main station building on the downside included a booking hall, ticket and parcels office, station master's accommodation, and a platform canopy supported by pillars decorated with ornate ironwork. A brick-built waiting shelter was provided on the upside platform, which was reached by way of the Barrow crossing. The railway passed over a level crossing at the south end of the station. A small signal cabin was sited on the upside next to the crossing. This was replaced in 1955 when a more substantial brick-built signal box was constructed at the far end of the down platform. The level crossing gates were then controlled by a mechanical wheel operated inside the box, which can be seen in use later on in the programme. Viewed from the approach road, the entrance to the goods yard can be seen behind the station house. The yard included a substantial goods shed with sidings and a cattle dock, the latter of which was put to good use on market days, as Leo Dolling recalls.
And of course at Ottery it was a market town where they had a cattle market every other Monday. We used to have a cattle special. We would have an engine would come up about 10:30 in the morning, and bring a rake of empty cattle wagons in from Sidmouth Junction with a brake van. When you had more than half a dozen wagons, you had to have an engineer shunting, because you had to pull the loadeds out to put the next lot of empties back.
Ottery St Mary featured in the Southern Railway's guidebook for ramblers, Let's Get Out Here, published in the 1930s. It was the starting point for a walk through the picturesque Otter Valley towards Tipton St John's. 5 miles from Sidmouth Junction, the station at Tipton St John's grew in importance with the opening of the branch line to Salterton in 1897. It became one of the busiest single-line junctions in the West Country, with over 50 train movements on summer Saturdays. In southern days, the weekday service included 11 trains each way on the Sidmouth branch. There were 7 to and from Exmouth, plus daily goods trains scheduled in the morning and afternoon on both branches. Carriages on through trains worked to and from Waterloo were attached and divided at Tipton St John's. The passing loop had 2 facing platforms. A single-storey brick-built station building was situated on the up platform and included booking hall, ticket and parcels office. A short canopy extended over the platform, offering modest shelter for passengers during inclement weather. The downside platform was provided with a brick-built waiting shelter, albeit open to the elements. A small goods yard was situated on the upside behind the station building, with a short siding to the loading dock and cattle pen. The yard included a run-round loop separated from the main running lines, which allowed Exmouth branch trains to reverse direction. As with Ottery St Mary, a level crossing was situated at the south end of the station, next to the signal box, which had a mechanical wheel installed to operate the gates. Following the opening of the Salterton line, the station was provided with a footbridge. Alongside the level crossing was a large water tower which drew its supplies from the River Otter. Together with East Budleigh and Littleham stations on the Exmouth branch, Tipton St John's played host to a couple of camping coaches in its yard. This became a popular facility for holidaymakers visiting East Devon. Introduced by the Southern Railway in the 1930s, it lasted until the early 1960s, when it was withdrawn by British Rail. Immediately beyond the level crossing, the Sidmouth line climbed out of the Otter Valley on a sharp incline of 1 in 45. The rising gradient continued for almost 2 miles through Hertford Woods to the summit at Bowd. The Southern's Western Appendix provided specific instructions for the working of both goods and passenger trains over this section of the branch. A gentle descent for a further 1.5 miles took the railway into Sidmouth station, 8 1/4 miles from the junction. A typical journey down the branch took on average 30 minutes. Sidmouth station was not ideally located for the town it served, being over 1 mile from the seafront. Nonetheless, the town has long enjoyed its reputation as one of East Devon's most attractive resorts. In the 50s and early 60s, visitors flocked to Sidmouth in their thousands, with regular through trains from Waterloo, the Midlands and even from far-off Lincolnshire. For holidaymakers, both young and old, the resort was a perfect place to spend a couple of weeks by the seaside. A broad sheltered beach flanked by a long promenade, accommodation to suit all tastes, and a host of lively attractions provided ideal entertainment for the visitor. Beneath the towering sandstone cliffs, bathers could enjoy a dip in the sea or just bask in the warm sunshine. A deck chair for the morning or afternoon cost the princely sum of threepence. For the more energetic, there was always Salcombe Hill to climb before lunch. With panoramic sea views to enjoy at the top, it was well worth the effort. And if that seemed too energetic, it was possible to ride up instead, on the open toast rack charabanc. Above the western end of the promenade, Connaught Gardens was invariably a riot of colour. Nearby, Jacob's ladder stairway led down to the sandy beach below the cliffs, as it still does today. For those who fancied a spot of shopping or sightseeing, the town was close at hand with its ice cream parlours, gift shops and friendly pubs. And for anyone wanting to venture farther afield, the local Devon General bus passed the station on its way out of town. At the front of the station, the entrance to the booking hall was provided with a small canopy, a facility that still exists in 2005. The booking hall, ticket office, waiting rooms and porter's mess occupied the ground floor. Separate accommodation was provided in the station master's house. The main platform was protected by a long canopy extending most of its length. It was supported on pillars with decorative cast iron brackets. A shorter bay platform, seen on the right, was used to berth empty stock and for departures of local services. In the main platform, a run-round loop was provided to release locomotives on arrival at the terminus. The entrance to the goods yard was on the far side of the station. A large goods shed included a 2-ton crane. Alongside was the yard office. Traffic included general merchandise for local traders, building materials and cement. The signal box at Sidmouth had a 23-lever frame and controlled all movements in and out of the station. The single-line section to Tipton St John's was worked by Tyre's train tablet system, installed in 1904. Up until the 1930s, the station had its own locomotive shed and turntable. However, these were taken out of use when M7 tank engines were introduced, working from Exmouth Junction shed. Passenger traffic at Sidmouth remained steady up to the mid-1960s, with peak holiday times the busiest. School children made daily journeys to Ottery St Mary and back, with shoppers and commuters heading for Exeter on a regular basis. The high volume of first-class travel from Sidmouth generated good income for the station. When the Southern introduced the all-Pullman Devon Bell in the summer of 1947, it was no surprise that the train made its first advertised stop at Sidmouth Junction, en route from Waterloo to Ilfracombe and Plymouth. When the branch line from Tipton St John's to Salterton was opened in 1897, only one intermediate station was built at Budleigh. However, by the summer of 1899, a new single-line platform was brought into use at Newton Poppleford. Typical of many rural wayside stations, it was a simple affair. Accommodation included a booking hall, ticket and parcels office, porter's room and gents' toilet. A solitary goods siding was situated opposite the platform in the station yard. Access to the station was down a short footpath from the road overbridge. Continuing down the valley of the River Otter, the railway passed close to the village of Collerton Raleigh. A goods siding was located here, used mainly by local farmers. The facility was withdrawn when the siding was closed in 1953. East Budleigh Station, 3 miles beyond Newton Poppleford, was in reality much closer to the village of Otterton, with its solitary platform face This was another typical country station. The single-storey brick-built building provided basic facilities including ticket and parcels office, porter's room and storage area. A goods shed was situated next to the station office. Beyond the platform a siding led into the station yard, which included a cattle dock and feed store. For many years camping coaches were berthed in the yard, the station being close to Ladram Bay and the delightful scenery of the East Devon coastline. The 6.5-mile single-line branch from Tipton St John's was built with the prime objective of linking Budleigh Salterton with the rest of the railway network. When the first train eventually arrived in the summer of 1897, the townsfolk duly celebrated the event. In the opinion of most Victorians, the coming of the railway brought with it a recognition of status and prestige for the community. The fact that their station was somewhat less grandiose than that of neighbouring Sidmouth was perhaps overlooked in their moment of pride. The new station was sited on the edge of the town, as it then was, reached by way of a sweeping curve deep within a cutting. The modest single-storey brick-built building was compact and practical. Accommodation included a booking hall, ticket and parcels office. A canopy extended over the platform, offering protection for waiting passengers. A signal box was installed at the far end of the down platform, beyond which sidings entered into the station yard. After the line was extended to Exmouth in 1903, a passing loop was installed. The station then became an intermediate block post on the single-line sections from Tipton St John's and to Littleham, worked by the electric train token system. An endearing feature of the station was its seasonal holidaymaker's message, picked out in whitewashed pebbles on the upside platform embankment. Considerable earthworks were involved in the construction of the railway's extension from Budleigh Salterton to Littleham and Exmouth. A large swathe of woodland in the vicinity of Knowle was carved out to form a deep cutting in the route's alignment. On completion of his task, the contractor, Henry Lovett and Sons, commissioned a photographic record of the major bridge work involved in the area. When the railway reached Littleham, it was still a quiet village in the country, as early photographs illustrate. Despite its rural setting and the high cost of construction, the village was provided with what could be described as generous station facilities. However, the provision of a station at Littleham had been a stipulation of the roll trustees on whose land the railway was built. The main buildings on the upside included a station master's house, booking hall and ticket office. The station layout, including passing loop and platforms, was sited awkwardly on a sweeping curve with a level crossing at the Exmouth end. The signal box was situated on the downside platform by the crossing and was extended in later years to provide ticket-issuing facilities when the booking office was closed. A small wooden waiting shelter was provided on the downside platform. The station yard behind the platform included a timber-built goods shed. The yard sidings were used to berth a couple of camping coaches during the summer season. Although Littleham had daily commuters to Exmouth and Exeter, it was at its busiest in the summer months. By far the largest engineering project on the branch was the 23-arch Exmouth viaduct, describing a wide arc around the northern side of the town. At 30 feet high, this brick-built structure included 2 steel girder bridges and was wide enough for double track, although it always remained single. Originally, it had been proposed to build the railway from Littleham through a tunnel under the hill at Orcombe and along the seafront, to meet the existing line from Exeter head-on at Exmouth Station. The intention was to create a direct-through route from Exeter to Budleigh Salterton. However, this idea was rejected out of hand by the good folk of Exmouth. No way was a railway going to separate their town from its seafront attractions and sandy beach. The solution was an expensive one. Leaving the Exeter line just north of Exmouth Station, the sweeping curved viaduct took the railway out of the town, following an inland route instead. Beyond the viaduct, the line climbed a sharp incline of 1 in 50 to the south of Fear Park, eventually passing beneath Salterton Road before reaching the station at Littleham. Exmouth Station was completely rebuilt in 1924. The original station, dating from 1861, opened with the branch from Exeter and Topsham. After 1903, the Exmouth and Budleigh Salterton Railway brought an inevitable increase in traffic volume. Some adjustments to the station layout were made during the subsequent years. However, by 1924 the Southern Railway had transformed the station into a modern 4-platformed terminus. The work included a revised track layout with additional capacity, a new signal box, booking hall, ticket office, a glazed concourse, extensive platform canopies, and a handsome station frontage and forecourt. The yard was expanded to accommodate a large goods shed and longer sidings. In addition, the station had its own engine shed to service branch locomotives. With the changes, trains to and from Budleigh Salterton and Tipton St John's could use any of the 4 platforms or the yard, negotiated via Scissors Crossing at the neck of the station entrance. At the height of the holiday season, the station was full of passengers. Although threatened with closure under the Beeching Report, Exmouth remained busy with passenger traffic to and from Exeter. However, in the spring of 1967, passenger services on the branch line to Budleigh Salterton and Tipton St John's were withdrawn, and the railway closed to all traffic. By the summer of 1963, the character and atmosphere of the railway at Sidmouth Junction had changed little over the years. As Battle of Britain class No. 34049 Anti-Aircraft Command coasts into Platform 2 with a Salisbury to Exeter local service, the Sidmouth branch train awaits its passengers in the bay alongside. A few moments later, IVAT 262 tank engine 41320 eases the 2-coach train away and heads off down the branch towards Ottery St Mary. Our journey is enlivened by Leo Dolling, who recalls the time he signalled the first trains of the day at Ottery St Mary.
About 6:15, I cycled down the road and crept into the signal box, went in on my knees, and I give opening signals to Sidmouth Junction and opening signals to Tipton. Then they asked 3 poles 1. We had number 3 tablet instruments there. 3 poles 1, I answered 3 poles 1. Then they held in and I pulled the empty drawer, turned the comm and held in. Anyway, Charlie came up on this train this morning and he said, I looked out the train at Sidmouth Junction, I saw the starter off, so I knew you'd give him the road all right. Because you couldn't give him the road unless the tablet was out the other end, you see. But
moving on to Tipton St John's, M7 class tank 30024 is seen on shunting duties, before departing on a short working to Sidmouth. On the way, former Tipton St John's leading porter Jerry O'Brien remembers a serious incident involving a Pullman camping coach at the station.
Now Sidmouth, I showed you on the photograph there, he was a grade 2 porter, whose job it was to clean the camping coach and get it all ready. So seemingly he was supposed to have done that and put in a paraffin heater to air it out, like, you know, because this chap was the first letting of the season. Anyhow, but in the meantime the camping coach would be taken away in the winter time, you know, and done up and all that sort of thing. So, but he went in anyhow and he put his oil heater in there, and he then went on about his other jobs like going out with signal lamps and all that sort of thing. And the next thing was I heard the signalman shouting in the signal box, and I looked out the window and there was the camping coach in flames. It was burned right down, this camping coach was. I called the fire brigade immediately, but of course by the time they got there, you know, I mean, it was as good as. And it was all fitted out lovely for this new arrival, you know. So I can remember I had to phone up the station master immediately at Ottery and tell him, I said, I'm afraid our camping coach has gone up in flames. It can't be. I said, I'm afraid it is. Who is responsible? I said, I wouldn't know anything about it. I didn't want to get involved in that side of it, really. That wasn't for me to go shouting about it, really. So he come down on the next train, and he was never a very robust chap, as you know. He chain smoked, you know. And he looked quite ill when he got with worry when he got off the train, really. And he said, as a matter of fact, Mr. Collins is on his way. If you remember Mr. Collins at the time, the divisional superintendent. And he had a chauffeur and all to drive him, if you also remember, Leo. He was, you know, so about an hour afterwards his car pulled in, and of course in came Mr. Collins, his chauffeur. And he said to me, this is very serious. And I said, yes, very serious. But I said, I suppose accidents do occur, you can't, you know. There's nobody would deliberately do that. I said, you know, it's one of these things. So I said, it's no form of arson or anything like that. It's simply that was a mistake. And, you know, overlooked, something overlooked there. I didn't say it was the heater was overlooked or anything like that. Well, he said, whose job was it? And I said, it was Portland Natchez job. Well, he said, I want a full report from him, he said, you see.
In the final years of steam, BR Standard Class 4MT tank engines worked out of Exmouth Junction shed on branch duties. Ray Wonnacott was the regular booking clerk at Sidmouth and remembers how busy the station used to be.
We had 2 through trains each way from Waterloo, and also a through train to and from Cleethorpes, ran every Saturday. So right away from Cleethorpes down through from the Midlands through Sheffield, Birmingham. It was a very busy train, and it was nearly always 3 parts full when it arrived in Sidmouth, if not more. But of course they were dropping passengers off and picking passengers up all the way down. It was a very, very busy service and well used.
By the autumn of 1963, it was clear change was on the way. With the Western region now in charge, and the Beeching report published earlier that year, a question mark hung over the future of the line. At the beginning of November, steam gave way to diesel multiple units in an attempt to reduce operating costs. With the DMUs came a measure of flexibility. Some through journeys were scheduled between Sidmouth and Exmouth, but the idea of a semi-fast service from Sidmouth direct into Exeter was rejected by the powers that be on the grounds that it would be uneconomic. The benefit and convenience it would have offered passengers was not, it seems, part of the equation. Instead, the branch service to Sidmouth Junction continued much as before, with a change of trains required for onward journeys. Once the summer season had finished, the railway relied on its local traffic, mainly peak hour commuters into Exeter and school journeys to Ottery St Mary. At other times of the day, the railway saw a gradual reduction in passenger numbers. As a DMU starts out on its return journey to Sidmouth Junction, a familiar sight in the mid-1960s, Ray Wonnacott takes up the story.
The children, when it became known that the line was to go, the children for the schools gradually moved from rail to buses. There were some children right up until the end, but not very heavy in the very end. They all went by road, which they were changing over to. The summer season traffic, again, it all disappeared. it sort of declined. It's difficult to explain what happened. It sort of disappeared, coming up, leading down to it, and the rumours of it being shut didn't help at all. People seemed to drift away from rail travel and were finding other means. So at the very end, the traffic wasn't that terribly heavy. When the diesels came in first, they were kept very busy, but it drifted away. And also in the latter years, where the connections at Sidmouth Junction didn't seem to be maintained like they ought to have been. You got at the Sidmouth Junction and you had a very long wait for a service into Exeter. It was more or less making people to transfer across to other services, other ways of getting to it.
Emerging from Hertford Woods, the train passes the up-distant for Tipton St John's, as the signalman closes the level crossing gates to traffic. Such a scene was a typical everyday event at many rural stations, adding a timeless quality to the charm and atmosphere of Britain's country branch line railways. Despite its rural setting, being the junction station for Sidmouth, Budleigh, Salterton and Exmouth, Tipton St John's could be a busy place at almost any time of the day. Jerry O'Brien knew the station well during his time there as senior porter.
The station house was occupied by the ganger, and he kept a lot of fowls, and he used to let them run free around the place, like, you know. But somebody reported that they've seen rats, a rat or two, near the Silcock store. And of course rat poison was different in those days to what it is now. Well, it had to be spread on something like bread or something like that. And Mellon Wilson took on the job of dealing with the rats. So he has several cuts of bread and spread this here, and it was like margarine to look at, this stuff was. It was seemingly to deadly stuff. And he took it into the Silcock store, and he put a bit here and a bit there and so forth, all over the store. Now, Fred's hens, one of them discovered, he went up the steps, they can sense if there's any food about, you know. They got to, I suppose, to survive. And he had some, and he must have made some noise to the effect that to tell the others that there was a good something to eat there. And there was a flock of them went in there. And they cleared every bit that Len put down. And I was just about to lock up when poor Fred Arnold, the ganger, come in, and he was in a terrible state. He was livid. And of course, me, they come to being a leading porter there. He said, "You come with me, you come with me." So I went up around the back with him, and there were the hen, all laid out, stretched out, they were dead. I had to get on to the station master, and he said to me, "Fancy hens," he said, "getting hold of rat poison." Well, I said, "You brought it here in the first place, really." And he said, I don't think I'm going to worry too much about it," he said, "because I don't think," he said, "hens are allowed in Silcock stores." He said, you know.
As we leave Tipton St John's and re-enter the Otter Valley, the landscape broadens out into lush green water meadows. Brief glimpses of the river enliven the 5-minute journey to Ottery St Mary. Since the earliest days of the railway, Ottery St Mary was recognised as an important centre of local business. As well as a variety of traders, schools, shops and professionals, the community was dominated by the local farming industry. For many years the railway saw a wide range of goods traffic, both received and dispatched. On leaving Ottery St Mary, we catch a good view of the level crossings at Cadhay and Gosford from the driver's cab, followed by a rear view arriving at Sidmouth Junction, with the main line on the left of the picture. Our brief interlude shows activity typical of a busy branch line junction, the arrival and departure of trains on the main line with passengers joining and leaving, moments of hectic comings and goings interspersed with little more than the sound of birdsong. By the mid-1960s, warship-class diesel locomotives, introduced by the Western region some years earlier, were in charge of the Waterloo-Exeter services. The influence of Paddington's hierarchy was felt even further when it was announced that some sections of the main line between Salisbury and Exeter would be reduced to single-line operation. Despite this gloomy outlook, railway folk were still proud of their industry. Reg Richardson, who started out as a cleaner at Exmouth Junction Shed in the 1920s, shares his early memories with former colleagues Cyril Deem and Fred Turner.
And you could leave school at 14 in those days. I wasn't very old. Anyway, when I was 15, I started cleaning. There was 3 shifts, 20 on each, in a late turn and a night work. We didn't realise really until no one should have done any night work until we were 18, but the union didn't help us much. That we didn't know anyway, you know. Anyway, I started in March 1943. Very often there was 2 of us, if I remember rightly now. There was 2 standing on points at Exmouth Junction and Central. And we used to take the list down for the train crews. And then when we came back, we do a bit more cleaning. And well, that went on for about 2 to 3 months. And then they say, right, your turn for firing. There's no one else to do it. You're the oldest hand now. They had the Blitz in Exeter, you know, and it lost a lot of people. Seniority was fairly quick in those days. Everything went by seniority, no matter how well you studied. So I went on the pit. That was the first job, and I wasn't never very big. I found it hard work, but you learn, you get tough, you get hardened to it. And there's also a little local shunter. He had a great big, massive great hopper that would be, that you'd push the coal trucks underneath and electricity would lift it up and it would tip up and you had to keep it supplied, and that you get the feel of filling up the boiler and just knocking about gradually.
Leaving Sidmouth Junction once again, we catch a driver's eye view of the line ahead as a DMU makes a smoky departure onto the branch. The line soon drops into the Otter Valley as views of the river flash past the window. Further on, the camera captures passing shots by the two intermediate level crossings, before reaching Ottery St Mary. During its final years, single-unit diesel rail cars were scheduled to work the branch, as seen here at Ottery St Mary. In 1955, the Southern region built a new 16-lever signal box at the station, complete with mechanical wheel to operate the level crossing gates. In time-honoured fashion, signalman Len Rogers sets up the road for the down train and then, once on its way, opens the gates for road traffic to cross the line. Tipton St John's is seen in the distance as a DMU arrives to connect with the Exmouth line. Despite officialdom suggesting otherwise, passenger business still appears to be buoyant, if the platform is anything to go by. The DMU makes its way up the 1 in 45 incline towards Sidmouth, as we turn the clock back to the steam era to witness an Exmouth line train arriving off the branch from Budleigh, Salterton. After running round its coaches, the loco shunts into the loop, before crossing over to the downline platform to await departure. A few minutes later, a connecting train from Sidmouth arrives at the up platform bound for the junction. When it closed in 1967, Tipton St John's was the last single-line junction station in the West Country. Holwell, A similar location on the southern so-called Withered Arm west of Oakhampton, junction for the Bude, North Cornwall and Torrington lines, had been closed a few months earlier, in October 1966. On leaving Tipton St John's, our journey continues down the Otter Valley via Newton Poppleford and East Budleigh to Budleigh Salterton. Although just within the East Budleigh parish boundary, the station was much closer to the village of Otterton, whose church is seen from the train. Local attractions included Ladram Bay and Bicton Gardens. An excursion train, headed by a Hymek Type 3 diesel locomotive, arrives at East Budleigh to pick up returning passengers. Next is a DMU on a local service. Soon the Otter Valley widens out to its mouth at Budleigh Salterton, and a whiff of sea air wafts inland to greet the train. The railway reached the outskirts of the town to the north, near the village of Kersbrook, curving round a wide arc to the right, in a deep cutting that led to the station. Although built in Victorian times, Budleigh Salterton had the atmosphere and features of a typical southern station, with its signs and paintwork in southern green and a footbridge similar in style to those seen at many a London commuter station. Leaving Budleigh Salterton on a rising gradient of 1 in 50, the 1903 extension to Exmouth reached its summit in a deep cutting at Knoll. It was built to accommodate double track, but remained a single line throughout its existence. Shortly after the only intermediate station at Littleham, the line descended at 1 in 50 towards Exmouth, crossing the 23-arch viaduct before reaching the town station, a distance of just over 4.5 miles. As a DMU arrives at the terminus, former Exmouth railwayman Cyril Deem recalls his days working at the station during the 1950s.
There was a vacancy came up in Exmouth booking office, and obviously I was recommended to fill the position, which I did, which was a really busy booking office, the busiest in the west of England, may I add, because there was 1,500, perhaps 2,000 season ticket holders. That was about it, Fred, wasn't it?
About it, yeah.
Plus the weekly season ticket holders, plus the workmen. The late turn man in the office used to stamp up 100 workmen's tickets for the man next morning. And they'd go on the first train, there was no doubt about that. They were gone on the 6:40. For Livingston, Topsham, Postal Bridge and Budleigh Salterton as well. Which had a fair old booking each day as well. And principally by the end of the 7:15 there was was 250 plus workman's tickets for Exeter gone. Well, I used to reckon to get rid of 32 per minute. Try doing that with computers today. You never put your money away. It went back on the counter until the train departed. There were bookings all over the country, yes. But you hoped and prayed that you didn't have one that needed a blank card ticket, because that took too long. That was the situation each and every day.
At Exmouth, railway passengers could cross the River Exe to Starcross Station by the ferry operated by the Devon Dock Pier and Steamship Company. Through bookings to and from local stations were offered, often in connection with special excursion facilities. For many years, the ferry operation was linked to GWR and Western Region services at Starcross, which had a jetty directly connected to the station. In 2005, the ferry still provided a way across the Exe during the summer months. In the final years of steam, special excursion trains became popular among railway enthusiasts. On Sunday, the 28th of February 1965, the Locomotive Club of Great Britain organised a rail tour of the East Devon branch lines. Departing from Waterloo Station at 9:02, the train made its way out of London on a murky winter's morning. After a non-stop run to Yeovil Junction in just over 2 hours, the LCGB special continued on to Axminster. Here, another train was waiting in the bay platform to take some of the passengers on the Lyme Regis and Seaton branches. Meanwhile, 35022 continued on to Seaton and Sidmouth junctions, where tank engines were waiting to take over for trips down the branch lines. At Sidmouth Junction, after detaching the rear coaches, GWR pannier tank 4666 is suitably adorned for its special duties. We travel with Roy Letton, former booking clerk at Budleigh Salterton, who recalls some entertaining moments during his time on the railway.
I can remember one instance at Autry where they were a pound down, or 10 shillings down, sorry. It was a 10 bob note. And Doug Fewens was the grade 1 then. It was after Jack Warland had left. And they lost his 10 shillings. He said, well, I'm sure it went into the fire, which is right opposite the ticket window. So Mr. Bibbin says, well, we'll put that to the test. Let's try it and see. So they put a 10 shilling note on the window, went out and slammed the door, and the 10 shilling note took off towards the panic arose then, of course. But it didn't go in the fire, it landed in the fender. But they realised then it might have been true, the 10 shilling note might have gone in the fire. Because they used to draw that way, and then the chimney would take it away as well. So possibly that's what happened. They were 10 shillings down and Sidmouth. Jack Hawkes was the station master. Well, we had 2 porters there. There was Frank Adlam and Courtney Summers. They were very adept at carrying suitcases from the barrier to the train. In fact, if someone put their suitcase down to hand out their ticket for check-in, the suitcase was usually gone. But well, they worked very well there. And of course you had the freight office there as well, with 2 lorry drivers working there. Main traffic out of Sidmouth, you had the school children going to Budleigh. Your first class passengers on the 1020, Waterloo was quite a popular destination from Sidmouth. Exeter again was a popular one. If you had a few season tickets, not very many, but there were a few. There wasn't much in the way of parcel traffic as such. A lot of PLA looks in advance. That was quite a thing that used to get there.
On arrival at Sidmouth, the crowds look on as the pannier tank pulls forward to run round its train, a practice not seen at the station since the introduction of diesel multiple units in the autumn of 1963. One wonders how officialdom might react in 2005, were a photographer to be found perched on the crossbar of a signal gantry. As we say a nostalgic farewell to Sidmouth Station for the final time, our journey back to Tipton St John's gives us another chance to enjoy the company of Leo Dolling as he explains the working of the afternoon goods train on the branch.
Going back to Octree again, we used to have the 2 freights down in the morning, then we would have two up in the afternoon. The 11.8 Exmouth would come through and go through Octree to pick up any traffic, go out to Sidmouth Junction, and then later on in the afternoon we'd have the 3.3 Sidmouth to Exmouth Junction. That was a freight that used to come out from Sidmouth, pick up at Octree, go on, put its upward traffic onto the 450 Exmouth Junction, 520 from Sidmouth Junction, then it would run on to Wimpole, and it would do all Wimpole shunting, all the cider shunting.
Back at Tipton St John's, true to southern operating practice, the Lyme Regis and Seaton sections of the tour meet up with the Sidmouth portion to combine into one train for the final run through to Exmouth and Exeter. After shunt movements were completed, the double-headed 8-coach train is seen departing, passing Newton Poppleford on its way to Budleigh Salterton and in the deep cutting at Knoll. Beyond Exmouth, the rail tour makes its way along the banks of the River Exe near Lympston before reaching Exeter Central. Here the train was reunited with 35022 for the return journey to Waterloo. After closure of the line in the spring of 1967, the task of reclaiming the track and signalling equipment fell to the district civil engineer. An inspection took place in early May to assess the work involved. Later that year, engineers' trains began removing signalling equipment and platelayers' huts. Lifting of track began in May 1968, starting at Sidmouth Junction, where the connection to the main line had been severed on 11th of June 1967. However, on the 10th of July, the River Otter burst its banks after heavy rainfall and breached the line between East Budleigh and Newton Poppleford. With 30 wagons and other recovery equipment isolated by the floods, the section between Tipton St John's and Sidmouth and the line towards East Budleigh were dismantled and removed sometime later using road vehicles. Work progressed at Budleigh Salterton, and by mid-August track lifting had reached Littleham. A month later, the railway had passed into history. Following removal of the track, several notable structures remained in situ, the most recognisable being Exmouth Viaduct. However, within a few years, the former railway alignment made way for various road improvement schemes in Exmouth. At Littleham Cross, the deep cutting either side of the old Salterton road bridge was filled in, allowing a new road junction to be constructed. Exmouth Viaduct, a major landmark in the town for almost 100 years, succumbed to the demolition squad in 1985 and was captured in its dying moments by local photographer Peter Smith. When the viaduct had been swept away, another local improvement scheme saw a new roundabout and road widening at Marpool Hill, with housing development in the space once occupied by the railway. Part of the former track bed between Exmouth and Littleham has been converted into a footpath and cycleway. By the turn of the century, the local landscape had changed out of all recognition. Where once was engine shed and sidings, a new ring road now relieves traffic flows into the town, avoiding the busy Exeter Road approach. By the early 1970s, the former Southern Railway station, opened in 1924, no longer catered for the crowds of holidaymakers it once served in the post-war years, and it too vanished from the scene to make way for a roundabout. The new single-storey station was compact and somewhat utilitarian in comparison. It incorporated Platform 2 of the former terminus and was opened on the 2nd of May 1976. Despite the ever-present threats to local branch lines, the railway from Exeter to Exmouth continues to thrive as a useful and popular transport link and appears to have a reasonably secure future. In 2003, responsibility for the service passed to Wessex Trains. Despite the line being single, trains run every half hour, passing each other at Topsham. Several Exmouth services continue beyond Exeter to Barnstaple, Paynton, and on summer Sundays to Oakhampton. In 1974, the station site at Littleham was bought by the local council for a sheltered housing project. Now known as Jarvis Close, the only remaining recognisable railway feature is the station building itself, incorporated in the new development. The track bed between Littleham and Knowle has been converted into a cycleway and footpath. In 2005, it provides a popular recreational facility in this scenic corner of East Devon. The old railway bridges at Castle Lane and Knowle, together with one of the tallest brick-built railway structures in Devon at Dulwich Lane, still stand, testament to the soundness of their construction over 100 years ago. Nothing remains of the former station at Budleigh Salterton. After several years left in a derelict state, some development took place in the old goods yard with the opening and eventual closure of local supermarkets. Since then, housing projects have sprung up on former railway land. The only link with the past is in the name given to the new residential development on the site of the station, Stanley Mews, in memory of the last station master, Mr. Stanley Murch. Beyond the station, a short stretch of the track bed has been converted into a footpath which passes beneath and above several bridges for about a mile to the outskirts of the town. Here it's still possible to see the old road and railway bridge at Kersbrook, now isolated following realignment of the A376 to East Budleigh. As with many old railway stations, that at East Budleigh has been converted into a pleasant country home. Now occupied by owners sympathetic to its railway origins, the platform and canopy have been retained and restored, recreating the atmosphere of times past. Such cannot be said for the station at Newton Poppleford, which was completely demolished. Today there is no trace of the railway. Even the road overbridge has been removed to allow for levelling and widening under a traffic improvement scheme. Of all the former railway stations, that at Sidmouth is still clearly recognisable, almost 40 years since it was closed. The station house and booking hall have been converted into office accommodation, with the original entrance and canopy hardly changed at all. At the rear of the building, the platform roof, complete with its valance, protects a covered storage area. The goods shed and yard are occupied by a firm of builders merchants, engineers and other local traders. Buses serving the town's terminus at the Triangle link it with Exeter, Exmouth, Seaton and Honiton, now the railhead for trains to Yeovil, Salisbury and London. Tipton St John's is still the peaceful village it always was, despite the railway's intrusion for almost 100 years. Once again, few would realise there was a busy railway junction at its centre. To the south of the station, a new housing development has been built on former railway land, while the station itself was converted into a private residence. To the discerning eye, a few telltale signs of its former railway use can still be found, among them the concrete drain trap positioned beneath the platform's water column. Towards Ottery St Mary, the track bed has been ploughed back into the adjoining fields. In the distance, beyond the hedgerows, the old iron girder railway bridge still spans the River Otter, though no longer witness to the sound of wheels clattering over its decking. The scene at Ottery St Mary is very similar, with little to show that the railway once passed through the town. Although the station house survives as a local youth centre, it is only on close inspection that one discovers its connection with the past. Wander off the beaten track down quiet country lanes and it's possible to find the sites of the level crossings at Cadhay and Gosford. The crossing keepers' cottages are still inhabited, though the new owners no longer have to worry about passing trains. Amazingly, at Cadhay, the old gates still stand across the road, albeit for no particular reason, save to protect cattle in the adjoining field from straying onto the highway. And so to Sidmouth Junction on the main line. Although it was closed in March 1967, along with the branch lines it served, the former station still saw trains passing through on their way between Exeter and Waterloo. It remained deserted and abandoned for the next 4 years. However, by the early 1970s, following new housing development in the village of Fenniton, it was decided to reopen the station to serve the local community. The former down platform was brought back into use on the single line when the station was reopened on the 3rd of May 1971. Following demolition of the original station building, a prefabricated ticket office housing the control equipment for the automatic barrier crossing at the west end of the station was erected on the site. Now staffed by Network Rail personnel, Fenniton Crossing belies its former role, a replica Southern Railway name sign providing evidence of happier times. More recently, the station has seen further improvements, including the extension and resurfacing of the platform, together with the installation of an electronic train indicator board and public address system. New station signing completes the corporate image transformation in the privatised railway environment of the 21st century. The manually operated level crossing gates have long gone, being replaced with modern automatic barriers. Across the road, the old Nog Inn still provides a link with the past, and a pint or two for the weary traveller, no doubt. In the summer of 2005, South West Trains' timetable has a service of 13 trains each way on the Waterloo-Exeter route, using Class 159 diesel units. The former up platform is no longer used and has escaped demolition. In the distance, the branch junction is now overgrown and hardly recognisable, although some evidence of the station's southern heritage can still be found on close observation. A single line in the direction of Honiton is all that remains of the once extensive track layout and goods yard. The old junction signal box was taken out of use and demolished soon after the branch closed, together with the remaining yard sidings and run-round loop for Platform 3. While the two branch lines have slipped into the mists of time, it is still possible, with a more enlightened attitude towards rail investment, that the former Southern Main Line could yet be redoubled in the future. The ability to pass trains without waiting for single-line sections to become free, and the subsequent recasting of schedules, will offer a more attractive regular pattern of services. Such would be a fitting tribute to the line's Southern Railway heritage. It is surely a prospect that would be greatly welcomed by the population of East Devon.